Welcome here to the final for the 8th World Championship.
Beer number 5 for you.
Dear members of the jury, dear members of the audience, and dear viewers from all over the world, welcome back to another presentation by me, and this time it's my final presentation. Again, my name is Léon Rodenburg. I'm owner, brewer, and beer sommelier at Bierbrouwerij de Magistraat in Almkerk, Noord-Brabant. And that it is in Noord-Brabant, you will find out later that that's actually a very important fact for the rest of my presentation. As a beer sommelier, my goal was to understand my own beer better, to be able to say if what I brew is actually what it needs to be, if it's perfect or not. And that's why I became a beer sommelier about 4 years ago. And since then, I've been also training for the World Championships, and I have participated before, and I stood on this stage 3 years ago. So I'm very honored and proud that I can be here again. Before we dive into the perfect beer that I am going to present to you, I want to take you on a small trip, a trip to Noord-Brabant. It's the southern province of the Netherlands. So let's imagine you're walking around the fields, you see a lot of grass, cows. We have no hills in the Netherlands, or almost none, so maybe slightly hilly, but not much. And suddenly you see a building pop up in the scenery. And it looks like a church. You walk in, you see people walking around, people with hoods, with clothing. They look like monks, but they don't talk. Very strange. You walk around the building, you see the inside of the church, it's beautiful. You walk around another corner, suddenly you see a brewery. Like, okay, that's interesting. But there's one thing that you will actually hear or not hear. It's completely silent. People don't talk. The monks don't talk. And actually the slogan of this brewery that I'm going to present to you is enjoy the silence. So today we're going to enjoy the silence with this beer. This beer is, like I said, a beer brewed in a monastery, and then specifically a very special monastery. It's a Trappist monastery. So the monks there adhere to the Trappist rules, and they adhere to ora et labora, which is Latin for prayer and work. So that's what they do. They don't fully live in silence. There are certain times of day that they're allowed to talk, and there are certain times of day that they're not allowed to talk. But what they also do is brew beer. And to me, this is one of the beers that has been one of the biggest inspirations for what I brew. And to me, this is actually the perfect example of this style that we're going to taste. So La Trappe is a Trappist brewery, and to be a Trappist, you have to get certified, and there are certain rules that you need to adhere to. The funny thing about La Trappe is that they have a connection to a commercial brewery, which technically is not always allowed, but in their case, the commercial brewery is mainly responsible for distribution, which is allowed. In the brewery, they're not allowed to make profits, so anything that they make, any profits, they go back to the brewery and they go back to the monks and to making their living quarters better and to help the rest of our society. Unfortunately, La Trappe is going to be the only Trappist beer from the Netherlands. We have another Trappist beer, Zundert. But the Zundert Abbey is closing down because nobody is choosing monk as a new job. I also didn't choose monk as my profession. I chose brewing, which is close enough, but I'm not a monk. So luckily, La Trappe will be here to stay around, and we'll be able to enjoy this beer a lot longer than that we'll be able to enjoy the Trappist beer of Zundert. This beer is a triple. It's 8% alcohol. And while I'm going to open it for you, I will tell a little bit about the triple. A triple is, you see in commercials and in places where commercial activities are happening, you see in the marketing that a triple is generally in a wooden cask, and you see a monk write 3 crosses on the cask, like this is the triple. But triple is actually a very quite young beer style. Because in early days, because of our malting technology, we weren't even able to make beers that have this color. So while I'll pour it from the bottle, you can see that it's a very light colored beer, which in history, when the monks started working, started brewing, wasn't even possible. because the fires that were used to kiln malt were actually always open. So the fire would caramelize, burn slightly the malt, and light beers were not possible. The first triple was actually named so by Westmalle, another Trappist brewery. And it was around the 1950s that their beer actually came into effect. Of course, for marketing activities and marketing, commercial sort of goals, you always see these monks drawing and striping on the wooden kegs. This beer is not brewed in a wooden keg anymore. It's not put there, it's not fermented there. This is fermented in a very beautiful, highly modern brewery that was installed by the monks. So even on brewing technology, they know what they're doing. It's one of the most beautiful places you could ever see when it comes to brewing. I think it's time to have a smell, at least. Or let's smell first. I invite the jury to do the same. So the first smell of the beer, you smell, I always call this Belgium. And that is, when people know, they know. And if you don't know, it's quite weird to hear that you smell Belgium. But what I'm, all the brewers in the room, they will be like, oh yes, Belgium. And the people that don't brew, they're like, what is he talking about? But I'm talking about the aromas and the characteristics that you get when you use a Belgian top fermenting yeast. And that was used for this beer. And it gives it quite a lot of banana, clovey, maybe some chemical notes, solventy. Those notes are all in this beer, with a slight background hint of the malt that was used. A triple is generally mainly Pils malt, sometimes some specialty malt, but it's mainly Pils malt and sugar. The sugar is used to give it more alcohol, but keep the body low, so it stays drinkable. So that is what I would expect if I take a sip. Then if we look at the beer, I mentioned the color. It's quite pale. It's a bit orangey colored. The foam was quite coarse. It wasn't very fine. It's also because of the temperature of the beer. It's quite warm, so I would serve it a little bit cooler than this. But you can see that at least there's some foam on top, and you can see the bubbles rising in the glass, which to me suggests that this is going to be an effervescent beer with quite a lot of carbonation. Let's take a sip, and I invite the jury to do this also. The first thing you immediately notice is the carbonation. So it's quite highly carbed. It's re-fermented in the bottle. That's what you can see as well, because you can see some yeast and other things float around in the glass, depending on how you pour. But that re-fermentation adds a lot of carbonation to the beer. And that is, I guess, one of the most deciding factors for a triple to me. Triples are supposed to have high carbonation. And that's why I also like it that they're still serving this in a bottle, because you can make triples and put them in a can. You see that more and more in the craft beer scene as well. But triples from cans are generally quite flat. I miss carbonation. This beer, in that sense, to me, is perfect because it has the right amount of carbonation. It refreshes the mouth, and you don't really notice it's 8% alcohol. So that to me means that it's brewed well, and it's also very dangerous because it's easy to overdrink this beer. Just drink slowly. Note the alcohol 8%. After the carbonation, the second thing you notice is that it's quite dry, and retronasally you get quite a lot of those solventy alcohol notes at first, but they go off into fruity notes, apricot, peaches maybe, some banana still, and you can still notice some of the cloviness that's in there. That's all from the fermentation. Hops are used, because they have to be used, but they're not used in a very high amount. The key role of this beer is given to the yeast. So if you don't have this yeast, the same yeast that Trappe is using, you will never be able to brew this beer. So one of the goals I had at a brewery was to find out which yeast they are using. And I think I have found it. So I've been working hard to recognize all the Belgian yeasts, and I think I found the yeast that La Trappe is using. And the beers that I can brew with that, I very much like. So this beer has been a great inspiration to me in that sense. Then we need to pair this with something. Like Jens mentioned in my text that I wrote for the World Cup, I was talking about the perfect beer. As a brewer, I'm always striving for the perfect beer, well knowing that it maybe doesn't exist. So kind of sort of the definition of insanity maybe. You strive for something that's never achievable, but I always strive for the best beer, the perfect beer. And what you need for that is also a perfect situation. The situation I'm gonna paint is mainly around food, so I will talk a little bit about food pairing. And I've been studying with someone who we call the taste professor in the Netherlands. And he's actually the person that did a lot of research on taste and pairing, mainly regarding wine, but also regarding beer, other spirits, coffee, tea. You can all pair those. And in his theory, food pairing is actually more about mouthfeel than it is about aromas. And if you ask people about food pairings, they generally directly go into aromas. Like, this smells a bit like a banana, so maybe I need something with banana in it. But it's actually irrelevant at first. To get a perfect pairing, again, perfection, to get the perfect pairing, you need to talk about mouthfeel. So this beer is quite drying, and that's because of the slight bitterness that sort of cleanses your mouth, and it is very carbonated. So it has a lot of carbonation, and those elements sort of give it its unique possibility to pair with foods that are fatty or quite drying in itself. So for fatty food, I don't think you need anything else than cheese paired with this beer. So my first pairing, and that's a classical kind of boring pairing, would be cheese. But as you know, last time in my presentation, I also went into the Asian cuisine to find inspiration. So in this case, I also want to mention something from the Asian cuisine again. And in this case, my suggestion would be to serve this with Chinese kwa bao, and those are the bao buns that you sometimes see. So I think in Europe, they're mainly called bao buns. The Chinese word for it is kwa bao. It's like this motion is called kwa, and that a bao is a bun, so that's why it's like that. And you can fill those with a lot of things. And I would fill this with something meaty, with fat, because the carbonation of this beer will actually cut through the fat. So even after taking a bite, your mouth is going to be completely filmed, and that film will be cleared, like fully, by all the carbonation that is in this beer, and that makes you ready for the next bite from the kwa bao. So that would be my second suggestion. To get back to perfection, to me, this is the perfect triple. It was not the first triple. I mentioned Westmalle was the first to claim that. La Trappe claimed a different beer style, the quadruple, but we're talking about the triple here. To me, this is the perfect triple. It balances the right amount of aromas, it has enough dryness, it has enough carbonation, and this is, to me, the beer that I look up to. The beer wins quite a lot of prizes in competitions, like the European Beer Star that we're going to get, that's going to be announced on Wednesday again. And to me, that is totally clear why that is. To me, this is the perfect triple. I'd like to thank you very much. This was my presentation. And I wanted to end with enjoy the silence.
Many congrats to Léon Rodenburg.